I was wiping down the counter at Daisy's diner when the sky turned the color of old bruises. Storm clouds rolled in over the prairie, swallowing the last strips of sunset. The windows rattled with the first punch of wind, and the neon open sign in the window flickered like it wasn't sure if it wanted to keep trying. "Call it a night, honey," Daisy said, flipping the closed sign with a sigh. Ain't nobody coming out in that. It was my 4th week in Willow Ridge, and I still wasn't used to being called honey by a woman who'd known me as a teenager and now pretended my 10-year absence had been a long weekend. "I just need to mop by the back door," I said, tying my dark hair back tighter. "Then I'll lock up." Daisy patted my hand, eyes kind and sharp at once. "Don't stay late, Ray. Not with everything going on." We both knew what she meant without saying it. The Wilder Gang, masked riders, late-night robberies, whispers about an outlaw boss who never showed his face and never left loose ends. I'd heard their name before the bus even rolled into town. Willow Ridge might have been a dot on a map surrounded by miles of prairie, but it had a way of attracting trouble like a magnet. Or maybe I just brought mine with me. "I'll be quick," I promised. Daisy hesitated, then grabbed her keys. "You text me when you get home." "I mean it." "Yes, ma'am." The bell over the front door chimed one last time as she stepped out into the wind, shoulders braced. I watched her cross the street to her old green pickup, lights flashing on, then disappear into the dark. Silence settled over the diner, just the hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock, the low growl of thunder. I exhaled slowly, rolling my shoulders. 4 weeks. 4 weeks since I'd walked away from a downtown hospital job from 12-hour shifts and buzzing fluorescent lights and an ex-husband who had perfected the art of telling me I was too much and not enough in the same sentence. 4 weeks since I'd felt like I could breathe. Willow Ridge wasn't perfect, but it was slower, softer. People looked you in the eye here, or they did, mostly unless they were talking about the Wilder Gang. Then eyes dropped, voices dropped, and everyone pretended to be fine. I grabbed the mop bucket and headed toward the back hallway where the kitchen door led out to the alley. The air was cooler back there, the storm sneaking through the old walls. Lightning flashed, throwing my shadow long and thin against the metal door. I just dipped the mop when I heard it. Not thunder, engines, more than one. They were low and mean, not like the ranch trucks that usually rolled through town. These sounded deliberate, purposeful, like men who weren't afraid of being heard. The hairs on my arms rose. I moved quietly to the door, heartbeats suddenly loud, and pressed my ear to the cool metal. The engines cut off almost in unison. Doors opened, closed. Boots hit gravel, voices, male, rough. Too close. I held my breath and slid the small square bolt into place on the back door, even though I knew, deep down, that little lock wouldn't stop anyone who really wanted in. "Back of the bank's dark," a voice said, muffled through the door. "Sheriff's truck just left town." "Doesn't matter," another voice replied, deeper, calmer. "We're in and out." No one sees a thing. My stomach dropped. The bank. I felt suddenly, painfully aware that Daisy's was one back door away from the alley that ran behind that bank. The sensible thing would have been to walk away from the door, call the sheriff, and wait in the kitchen. Except my phone was in my purse. On the front counter. Of course it was. "Get to work," that calm voice said, and something in the tone made me shiver. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was just final. I backed away slowly, every board under my boots creaking too loud in my own ears. I turned toward the kitchen, mind racing, when a thinner slice of sound cut through the thunder. The squeak of hinges. Not from my door, from the alley gate. Someone was coming toward the diner. I looked at the back door, at the dark kitchen, at the long empty hallway. For a second, panic froze me. Then I did what 10 years of triage had trained me to do. I moved. I darted into the small storage closet off the hallway, leaving the door cracked just enough to see the strip of light in front of the back door. My breath came shallow and fast as I pressed myself against shelves of canned tomatoes, the mop still in my hand like some ridiculous weapon. Bootsteps approached, heavy, unhurried. The back doorknob jiggled. then a low chuckle. Cute, that calm voice said. She locked it! My pulse roared in my ears. Metal clinked softly, like tools. The trim around the lock groaned. Light flashed again, and thunder rolled, covering the wrenching sound of the lock giving way. The door swung inward, bringing the smell of rain and exhaust. A man stepped in, silhouetted by the storm. He was tall. Broad shoulders and a dark jacket, hat pulled low. A bandana covered the lower half of his face, black against the lighter shirt collar. He scanned the hallway with quick, efficient motions that told me this wasn't his first time breaking into somewhere. My lungs burned. He glanced at the register counter visible at the far end of the hallway, at the empty stools in the diner. Place is clear, he called over his shoulder. Back door's tight, nobody here. His voice, I recognized it. The calm one from the alley. Outlaw boss. My fingers tightened on the mop handle. I watched him step fully inside, shaking the rain from his hat. Lightning flashed again, and for a second the light caught his eyes. They were gray. Pale gray, like the sky just before snow, framed by dark lashes. Not wild, not cold. Something else, watchful, older than he probably was. He glanced down the hallway once more, and his gaze caught on the barely open closet door. My closet door. He went still. Time stretched like taffy. His hand went to the bandana, adjusting it higher, then lower, like he was considering something. Finally, with a low exhale, he stepped toward me. Each step sounded like it echoed, even though he moved quietly. He stopped right in front of the closet. His gloved hand touched the edge of the door. And then, before I could think better of it, I did the one thing I never should have done. I met his gaze. Through that small crack, my eyes locked with those gray ones. He froze. I didn't see the bandana. I didn't see the storm behind him or the danger outside. I saw a flash of something that made no sense on an outlaw's face. Regret. Damn it, he whispered, so softly I barely heard it. A shout from the alley made him turn his head. Boss, we got company. Sheriff's circling back. Another voice. We gotta move. He swore under his breath, quicker this time, then looked back at me. In 2 strides, he swung the closet door open, and we were face to face. I swallowed hard. Up close, he was even more solid. Not just tall, but built like he'd spent his life working a ranch. Dark hair curls at the nape of his neck, jaw shadowed with stubble. The bandana hid his mouth, but his eyes were all I could see. I lifted the mop handle between us like a spear. Stay back, I managed, though my voice shook. He stared at the mop, then at me, and something almost like a smile flickered in his eyes. Easy, sweetheart, he said quietly. I'm not gonna hurt you. My throat felt dry. You broke into the diner. Yeah, I did. He tilted his head, studying me like he was trying to decide something. You Daisy's girl? I'm not anybody's girl. He huffed a soft breath. Right, you knew here, right? Right? My heart skipped. How do you know my name? I pay attention. Outside, engines revved again. He moved a fraction closer and I could smell rain on him, leather, dust. Listen to me. You saw me. That's a problem. I didn't. His eyes sharpened. Don't lie. We're past that. Fear shot through me. Cold and sharp. Boss! Someone yelled again. He didn't look away from me when he said louder 2 minutes. Bootsteps pounded away. My fingers trembled around the mop handle. If you want to hear what he says next, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the rest of our night. The thought drifted through me, absurd and soft, like the whisper of a friend on the couch beside you during a movie. I pushed it away because this wasn't a movie, this was real. What happens now? I asked, amazed my voice worked at all. He studied me, those gray eyes searching. Whatever he saw there must have made up his mind. He reached up slowly and pulled the bandana down. For the first time I saw his face, strong jaw, scar along his chin like a faint, pale line of lightning. Lips pressed into a tight line that had nothing to do with cruelty and everything to do with control. I didn't know what I'd expected the outlaw boss to look like, but I hadn't expected him to look tired. My name's Colt, he said quietly. Colt Wilder. Wilder. The name everyone in town whispered. My pulse thudded in my ears. You saw me without the mask, he said. Means I can't just walk out that door and leave you here. Not with my men on edge and the sheriff getting close. I swallowed. Are you going to kill me? The word felt wrong in my mouth, too big and heavy. His eyes sharpened, almost offended. No, I'm not. Then, I'm gonna keep you close. His voice dropped lower, calmer again. For your safety. I blinked. Blinked. His voice dropped lower, calmer again. His voice dropped lower, calmer again. For your safety. I blinked. My safety. If they know you gotta look at me? He shook his head. They won't be as gentle as I am. I caught on that word, not as gentle, and something in my chest did a strange twist. I don't understand. You don't have to, he said. You just gotta come with me. Every instinct in me screamed no. Every practical cell in my body remembered that 4 armed men were outside who might not share his reluctance to hurt me. Please, I whispered, hating how small my voice sounded. His gaze softened a fraction. You trust your sheriff to keep you safe from men who ride with me? They won't stop at Daisy's door, Ray. I thought of Daisy's kind eyes. Of the way she'd looked over her shoulder tonight. Of the town that was just starting to feel like something I could maybe call home. Fear made my decision for me. I lowered the mop. His shoulders relaxed a fraction. Good girl. I'm not a... I know. That almost smile flickered again. Grab your things. He stepped back, giving me space, and as I slid past him in the hallway, I realized something else. Between me and the open back door, with the storm and the voices and the danger, he took the place closest to all of it. He stood between me and whatever was outside without even thinking about it. I didn't remember much of the ride out of town. Just pieces. Colt's truck was big and old, the kind that shifted with a grunt instead of a purr. Rain snaked down the windshield as we left Willow Ridge behind, its handful of lights growing smaller in the rearview mirror. I sat stiff in the passenger seat, my purse clutched in my lap, still wearing my Daisy's apron. My fingers smelled like dish soap and coffee. Colt drove one-handed, the other resting loose on his thigh. His hat cast his eyes in shadow, but I could feel him look over at me once, twice, like he was checking I hadn't vanished. You cold? He asked finally, voice quiet enough that it almost got lost under the wipers. I'm fine. He glanced at my hands gripping the strap of my purse, knuckles pale. Without a word, he reached behind the seat, pulled out a worn denim jacket, and held it out. I hesitated. It's a jacket, Ray, not a snake. I took it, cheeks heating, and slipped it on. It smelled like cedar and dust and something I was already starting to think of as him. The warmth surprised me. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding myself until heat seeped into my arms and shoulders, loosening something. Thanks, I murmured. He nodded once. We turned off the main road eventually, onto a dirt track lined with fence posts. Lightning showed a stretch of pasture, the faint shapes of cattle huddled against the weather, a barn in the distance with one light glowing. We passed a faded mailbox. Wilder Ranch. My heart did a weird jump. You live here? I asked. Where else you think? His tone was dry but not unkind. I don't sleep in the bank vault. I looked out at the land, the way it rolled gentle and strong, as if it had existed like this for 100 years before me and would continue long after. I didn't picture an outlaw boss going home to to a ranch? To a porch light, I said quietly. He didn't answer right away. When you run cattle long enough, he said finally, you learn you can be 2 things at once, Ray. A man who works the land. And a man people whisper about when the sun goes down. I turned my face toward the window so he wouldn't, to see the way that tugged at something inside me. Because wasn't that why I'd left the city? Because I was tired of being one thing for everyone else and hollow for myself? If you were in my boots. A soft thought came, gentle as the rain on the glass. What's the first thing you'd do on that ranch tonight? Tell me below. I could almost hear future listeners answering, could almost hear their hearts racing with mine. The truck stopped in front of the house, a long, low structure with a wide porch and that single warm light shining through the kitchen window like a welcome. Colt killed the engine and turned to me. You come inside, he said. You don't run. Not into the dark, not toward the road. You run now, you die. Might be by my men. Might be by the men who'd like to see me fall. Either way, I don't want it on my conscience. I wasn't planning on running, I muttered, though I'd been wondering whether I could make it to the barn. His lips twitched. Good. He stepped out into the rain first, circling around to my side and opening the door. The gesture felt old-fashioned, almost gentlemanly, which made no sense at all. The wind slapped my hair into my face as I stepped out. Before I could push it back, his hand was there, large and warm, shielding me from the worst of it for a heartbeat. Watch your step, he murmured, his fingers barely brushing my elbow as he guided me up the porch. The door swung open before we reached it. A small, wiry woman in her 60s stood there in a flannel shirt and jeans, gray hair in a long braid down her back. Her eyes, sharp and pale blue, flicked from Colt to me in one quick assessing sweep. You brought trouble home, she said, voice flat. Evening, May, he replied. She snorted. Don't evening me. I straightened instinctively. I am Ray. Her gaze moved back to me slower this time. It wasn't unkind, but it wasn't soft either. She see your face? May asked Colt. Yeah. Then you're a damn fool. Nothing new, he said mildly. May looked at me again and sighed like she'd been doing this for him since he was born. You hungry, girl? The question caught me off guard. Yeah. A little. Get in here before you blow away. I stepped into the kitchen, warmth hitting me like a blanket. It smelled like coffee and stew and clean wood. A big wooden table sat in the center, scarred and well used. Boots lined up near the door. A cast iron pan on the stove. It looked like a home. May shut the door firmly behind us, cut the blinds, and locked it. Then she turned, hands on hips. All right, Colt Wilder. Start talking. I learned 3 things that night. 1. May had practically raised Colt after his parents died, and she was the closest thing he had to a mother. 2. She did not approve of his involvement with the Wilder gang, even if half the county whispered he was the one holding them back from full chaos. 3. Colt was not nearly as in control of everything as he pretended to be. We sat at the table with steaming bowls of stew while Colt explained in as few words as possible about the failed bank move, the sheriff returning faster than expected, and the fact that I had seen his face. Well, you should have kept the damn thing covered, May muttered, tearing off a piece of bread. Thanks, May. She turned to me. You scared, girl? I swallowed a mouthful of stew that tasted too good for this to be a crime-adjacent situation. Yes, ma'am. Good, means you're still thinking, you want to go home? I thought of my tiny rented house on the edge of town. The thin locks. The windows. The way engines had sounded tonight in the alley. I don't know, I admitted, my voice small. Honest answer. She nodded once. Well, you're safer here tonight. I don't want to cause trouble, I said quickly. If you let me go, I won't say anything, I swear. That's not the problem, Colt said quietly. I looked at him. Then what is? He leaned back in his chair, eyes on mine. You don't control what other people do with what they know. You might not say anything on purpose, but it takes just one person noticing you're nervous around me. One drunk ranch hand bragging about what he heard. One of my men getting jumpy. You're a loose end, Ray, and loose ends get cut. I'm sitting right here, I whispered. I know. His voice softened. That's why you're here and not in a ditch somewhere. May made a low sound, half growl, half sigh. You stop talking like that at my table. He glanced at her, something almost like apology in his eyes. I wrapped my fingers around the warm mug in front of me. What are you going to do with me? Colt looked at me for a long moment. I'm going to keep you close, he said again. At least until I can make sure everyone calms down. Then we'll figure out a way to put you back in your life without a target on your back. That's kidnapping, I said weakly. Depends who's writing the report. I have a job. Daisy will be told you're taking care of a sick relative just outside town, May cut in. I'll call her. She trusts me. Always did. My head spun. You can't just rewrite my life like this. Colt's eyes softened. I'm not trying to rewrite your life, Ray. I'm trying to make sure it keeps going. A lump rose in my throat, hot and thick. I'd come here for a fresh start, a new life. Not for that life to be derailed by a man everyone else called a criminal. But sitting there with stew warming my belly, May watching me like a hawk, and Colt's calm gaze anchored on mine, I realized something uncomfortable. I believed him. I believed that whatever else Colt Wilder was, he meant it when he said he didn't want my blood on his hands. Where am I going to sleep? I asked quietly. May answered. Guest room at the end of the hall. You lock the door from the inside. You shout if you hear anything off. Colt's jaw tightened. Nobody's coming in this house without going through me. You think I don't know that? May snorted. Still, girl can lock the door if it helps her sleep. My eyes burned unexpectedly. You don't have to carry this by yourself anymore, May said suddenly. So matter of fact it almost didn't register that she was talking to me. Whatever sent you running out here? It can sit on the porch a while. Let us worry about tonight. It was small, a hairline fracture in the wall ID built around my heart since my divorce, but it was there. I gave a shaky nod. Later, in the small guest room with its faded quilt and view of the dark pasture, I locked the door like May had said. But I also watched Colt from the window as he walked the property line in the rain, checking the gates, the barn, the trucks. He moved like a man who had done this 1,000 nights. A man who expected trouble. A man who was determined it wouldn't reach his house. You don't have to carry this by yourself anymore. Lying in a stranger's bed on a stormy night, kidnapped but not. Heart racing for reasons that weren't entirely fear, I didn't believe that. Not yet. But for the first time in a long time, I wanted to. Tell me in the comments. Do you think she should trust him yet? The next 3 days blurred into a strange, uneasy routine. Colt woke before dawn to feed the horses, his boots heavy on the floorboards as he crossed the hall. May made coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I helped with breakfast because it was either that or sit there feeling useless. You cook like a nurse, May remarked on the second morning as I scrambled eggs. I blinked. What does that mean? Efficient, too practical. Needs more butter. I laughed before I could stop myself. Worked in a hospital, did you? She asked, sliding more bacon into the pan. 10 years in emergency, I said. In the city. She nodded like this confirmed something she'd already suspected. Explains the hollows under your eyes. Colt walked in then, wiping his hands on a rag. You terrorizing my guest, May? Somebody has to. He looked at me, one corner of his mouth twitching. You doing okay? I hesitated. Physically, I was fine. Better than fine, honestly. The bed was comfortable. The food good. The coffee hot. May had loaned me a stack of flannels and jeans so I wasn't living in my Daisy's apron. The problem was my heart. That depends on your definition, I said carefully. His eyes warmed just a fraction, like he appreciated the honesty. Danger-wise, you're okay. Nobody's sniffing around. Sheriff's got more questions than leads after the bank move went sideways. But he's barking up the wrong tree. My men are rattled, but they think the only witness ran off. Good, May muttered. I clenched my fingers around my mug. So, how long do you think this will last? Until I know for sure they've calmed down. He rubbed a hand over the back of his neck. Could be a week. Could be 2. Could be longer. Panic flickered in my chest. My life is back there, I said, pointing vaguely toward town. I have a job. I signed a lease. I just started making friends again. I can't just disappear indefinitely. He met my gaze steadily. You'd rather go back and gamble they don't notice you? I'd rather not be in this situation at all. Yeah, he said quietly. Me too. There was something in his voice that made me look twice. It wasn't self-pity. It was weariness. Like this wasn't the first time he'd had to choose between two bad options. I set my mug down. How did you end up here, Colt? Outlaw boss by night, rancher by day? That's not exactly a guidance counselor's dream path. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's a long story. I'm not going anywhere, I said dryly. He tipped his head, conceding the point. Eat your eggs, May cut in, slapping a plate down in front of him. If you're going to crack your soul open at my table, you're not doing it on an empty stomach. Who says I'm cracking anything open? He grumbled. She just gave him a look. He sighed and picked up his fork. It took days for him to really answer my question. In that time, life at the ranch slowly started to feel less terrifying. I helped May with chores, my hands finding comfort in familiar motions, washing dishes, folding laundry, sweeping floors. I went with Colt to the barn sometimes, the smell of hay and horses wrapping around me like a different kind of medicine. You ever been around horses much? He asked one afternoon as I awkwardly brushed a chestnut mare who kept trying to steal my hat. Not really, I admitted. I grew up here, but my parents weren't ranch people. Dad worked at the feed store. Mom taught Sunday school. Closest I got to animals was the neighbor's dog. He chuckled, low and soft. You're doing fine. She likes you. She's trying to eat my ponytail. That's affection. She has a funny way of showing it. I muttered, but I couldn't help smiling. He watched me for a moment, leaning against the stall door, thumbs hooked in his belt loops. The way his eyes softened made my heart stutter. You're different here, he said. I blinked. What do you mean? Out here in the barn. Around May, you're looser. He shrugged. Less like you're waiting to get yelled at. Heat crept up my neck. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who knows the feeling. I paused with my hand on the mare's neck. Somebody used to yell at you too? Not exactly. His gaze drifted up to the rafters for a moment. Somebody used to expect me to carry everything. No complaints, no help. Just hold it all and don't drop it. That's heavy, I said quietly. He met my eyes again. Yeah. A long silence stretched between us. Not uncomfortable, just full. What about you? He asked. Who made you flinch like that? I hesitated. It would have been easy to say nobody. To change the subject. I'd gotten very good at that in the city. But out here, with dust motes in the air and a horse breathing warm against my shoulder, my defenses felt thinner. My ex-husband, I said finally. Elliot. Colt's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He hit you. No. I stroked the mare's mane, watching the way the strands slipped between my fingers. He never laid a hand on me. Just on my confidence. How? I swallowed. He made me doubt everything. Every decision, every feeling. If I was tired, I was being dramatic. If I was sad, I was ungrateful. If I wanted to talk, I was needy. If I was quiet, I was distant. Colt's eyes darkened. 10 years of that, I whispered. And you don't need bruises to feel broken. He stepped into the stall, then, slow and deliberate, careful not to spook the horse. I watched him, heart pounding, unsure what he was doing. He didn't touch me. He just stood there, close enough that I could feel his warmth, his presence like a wall at my back. You don't have to carry that by yourself anymore, he said quietly. My throat tightened. I'm not your problem, I whispered. You have gangs to run, banks to not rob properly, sheriff to outsmart. A ghost of a smile tugged at his mouth. You're under my roof. That makes you my responsibility. And I don't leave my responsibilities bleeding in the dark, even if the wounds are under the skin. Tears pricked my eyes unexpectedly. You feel like the only place I can breathe, I blurted before I could stop myself. Then I slapped a hand over my mouth. Oh my God, I didn't mean... He went still. Slowly, like he was afraid to spook me, he reached up and curled his fingers around mine, gently lowering my hand from my mouth. Say it again, he murmured. My heart tripped. It was just, say it again, he repeated, even softer. I met his gaze, my whole body trembling. You feel like... I swallowed. Like the only place I can breathe. A muscle in his jaw ticked. For a second, I thought he might back away. Instead, he stepped closer. Funny, he said, voice rough. That's exactly how you make me feel. My breath caught, and everything in me went very still. If you want to hear what he says next, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss where this night takes us. I should have known that kind of moment doesn't come without a cost. The next day, trouble found us. It came in the form of dust on the horizon and a low rumble of engines. I was in the kitchen with May rolling out biscuit dough when she froze mid-sentence. You hear that? I stilled. Outside, tires crunched on gravel. Not Colt's old truck. Something heavier. More than one. May wiped her hands on a towel, eyes narrowing. You stay put, she said. And if I tell you to run, you run. My heart hammered. Where? Root cellar, out back, trapdoor by the oak. You don't stop to argue. She marched to the front window and peered out through a sliver between the curtains. Her shoulders tensed. Damn it. What is it? I whispered, joining her. 2 trucks had pulled into the yard. 4 men climbed out, all in worn jeans, boots, and jackets. I recognized 2 of them from that first night in the alley by their builds and the way they carried themselves. Jake, tall and wiry with a mean slouch, and Rafe, broad and impatient. Both wore bandanas around their necks, loose and ready. Friends of Colt's, May muttered. The kind that ain't never brought me flowers. My stomach twisted. Jake looked toward the barn, where Colt was working with some fencing. He said something I couldn't hear. His gestures sharp. Colt straightened, shoulders tense. I thought they didn't know about me, I whispered. They don't, May said. And we're gonna keep it that way, if I have to hit someone with a frying pan. Despite the fear, a hysterical laugh bubbled in my chest. Stay in the kitchen, she ordered. Do not walk in there unless Colt calls for you. You understand? I nodded, palms sweaty. May, I said as she headed for the door. Be careful. She glanced back, and for the first time since I'd met her, I saw a flicker of something like fear in her eyes. You too, girl. She stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind her. I moved to the small window over the sink, heart pounding, and watched. Colt met the men halfway between the barn and the house, his stride easy but his posture all steel. What's the problem? He asked, voice carrying just enough for me to hear through the glass. Jake spit in the dirt. Sheriff's been sniffing around town. Asking about witnesses. Sheriff always sniffs around when someone rattles his cage, Colt said. That's his job. Rafe shook his head. This is different. He's talking like he's got something. Somebody saw you, Colt. My blood ran cold. Colt didn't glance at the house. Sheriff talks a lot of nonsense when he's rattled. You boys getting scared because a man with a badge flaps his jaw? Jake's eyes narrowed. We ain't scared. We just don't like the idea of some waitress knowing who our boss really is. Maybe you should do a better job of not drawing attention when you supposed to be ghosts, Colt replied, calm but firm. My breath caught. Waitress. Had they seen me? Heard my name in town. Jake stepped closer, too close. You wouldn't be protecting anybody, would you, Colt? Some little thing in an apron who batted her eyes at you? Colt didn't move, but the air around him changed. I protect this crew, he said quietly. I protect this land. I protect May. Anybody else is none of your damn business. So there is somebody, Rafe said, eyes gleaming. Thought so. You been distracted. He said the word like it was filthy. Enough, Colt snapped. You got doubts about me, you say them plain. You want to accuse me of something, you better have proof. Otherwise, you get off my land. My heart hammered so hard I thought they might hear it. If there's a witness, Jake said slowly, and you're hiding her. Jake, Colt said, voice dropping in a way that made even me shiver behind the glass. I want you to think very carefully about your next words. The air crackled between them. If you were in her boots,
What's the first thing you'd do on that ranch tonight?
Tell me below.
Right now, my answer was, find the trapdoor.
I eased away from the window, every instinct screaming at me to hide, to curl up somewhere small and dark and hope they never found me.
Ray, my name spoken quietly from the doorway made me jump.
Colt stood there, framed by the light from outside, hat low, jaw tight.
I swallowed. Hi. You okay?
He asked. I blinked.
You're asking me that. You have
Outlaw mutiny in your front yard. One corner of his mouth twitched, but his eyes were serious. They won't come in here.
Not while I'm standing. I heard them, I whispered.
They know there's a waitress. They're guessing, he said. Sheriff mentioned talk about a diner girl, but they don't know your name. They don't know you're here. And they won't. How can you be sure? Because I'm not going to let anything happen to you, he said simply. My chest tightened. You can't promise that, Colt. I just did. I shook my head, tears pricking my eyes. This is my fault. If I hadn't been taking out the trash, this is not your fault, he said firmly. You took out the trash at your job.
I chose to walk into that alley. I chose to pull my mask down.
I chose to bring you here. Your only mistake was hiding in a closet with a mop and thinking it protect you. A shaky laugh broke from my throat. It was a very brave mop, I said weakly. He smiled then, brief and genuine. I need you to trust me, he said. Just a little. Can you do that? I looked into his gray eyes, at the worry he wasn't bothering to hide now.
I thought of Elliot, of every time trusting the wrong man had cost me pieces of myself.
Then I thought of Colt walking the fence line in the rain. Of him standing between me and the back door that night. Of his hand closing gently around mine in the barn. I took a breath. I can try, I whispered. That's enough. He stepped closer, his hand lifting like he wanted to touch my cheek, then stopping just shy of my skin. I'm not going anywhere, he said softly. Not unless you tell me to. Tears spilled over, hot on my cheeks. I'm scared, I admitted. I know. He grabbed a dish towel from the counter and pressed it gently into my hand. Stay in here with May, he said. Lock the back door. Don't open it for anybody who isn't me. What about? If you hear my voice, he added, it'll be because it's safe.
You hear anybody else, you move to that trapdoor and you go. Colt. He met my eyes one last time.
If you stay, I stay, he said. If you're here, I'm here. Then he turned and walked back out the front door, shoulders squared, like a man walking into a gunfight. The confrontation didn't turn into a shootout, but it came close. I learned later that Colt pulled rank hard, reminding Jake and Rafe exactly who had kept them alive the last few years. He made it very clear that any move against a woman in this county, any woman would be treated as a move against him. And nobody wants that smoke, May said grudgingly as she relayed it to me over coffee once the trucks had finally left. They know he has half the reason they ain't all dead or in jail. Why does he bother? I asked, fingers wrapped around my mug. With them. With any of it. She studied me for a long moment. You really want to know? She asked. Yes. She sighed. Then you're gonna have to ask him yourself. Ain't my story to tell. It was almost midnight when I found Colt out by the corral, leaning against the fence, staring at the stars. The prairie was quiet around us, just the occasional low whicker of a horse and the distant bark of a coyote. The storm had blown through earlier, leaving the air cool and clean. He didn't turn when I approached, boots crunching softly on the dirt, but I knew he'd heard me. Colt always heard everything. You're supposed to be asleep, he said. So are you. He snorted softly. I sleep when I can. I came to stand next to him, resting my forearms on the top rail, mimicking his posture. The sky was huge out here. In the city, buildings and light pollution had always chopped it up, made it small. Here, the stars went on forever. I used to stand out here with my dad, he said quietly, surprising me. He'd point at the constellations and tell me stories. Cowboys and warriors and hunters in the sky. What happened to him? I asked gently. Same thing that happens to most men who think they can outrun their demons. His jaw tightened. He lost. I looked at him. He didn't look back. You asked why I do it, he said after a long moment. Why I bother with the gand, with the bank hits, with keeping idiots like Jake alive when they'd happily feed me to the buzzards if it meant a bigger payout. Yes, I said softly.
He exhaled, breath visible in the cool night air.
Because somebody has to hold the line, he said. This county. It's always had bad men in it. Men who'd take what isn't theirs, hurt whoever's in reach, leave the land bleeding if it meant another dollar in their pocket.
Like the Wilder Gang, I said. He grimaced.
Yeah, only they weren't always called that. My father ran with men like that.
They wore different names, different colors, but they did the same damn thing. And I watched it. I watched what it did to folks, to May, to me. My chest tightened.
When he died, Colt continued, the men he rode with wanted me to step in. Wilder blood, they said. Born for this. He spat the words out bitter. I was 22 and dumb as a mule. I thought, maybe if it's me I can steer it. Keep the worst of it off the town. Keep them from hurting the people I care about. So you became the boss, I whispered. Boss, he snorted. Yeah. Put on the mask. Ride out at night. Make sure the jobs were targeted. Corrupt ranchers. Dirty haulers. Men who could afford to lose a little. I told myself it was justice. Hell, sometimes it even was. He finally looked at me then, eyes sharp in the moonlight. But once you open that door, Ray, it doesn't close clean. Men like Jake join. They don't care about lines. They just care about what they can carry. And I've been holding the line ever since. Trying to keep them from crossing it. That's a lot to carry, I said, voice barely above a whisper. Yeah. He looked back at the sky. Some nights I think I'm doing better than my old man did. Some nights I'm not so sure. Silence stretched between us, full of all the things he wasn't saying. You could leave, I said softly. Walk away. Turn yourself in, make a deal, testify against them. Start over somewhere else. And leave this land to men like Jake? He shook his head. I walk away. They don't stop. They just get worse. And May, this ranch, Willow Ridge. They'd be the ones who pay for it. I bit my lip. What about you? He asked suddenly. Why'd you come back to this town after 10 years? Why not stay in the city, at your fancy hospital with your fancy husband? I stared at my hands. Because one day I woke up and realized I didn't recognize my own life. It was all noise. Beeping monitors, overhead pages, Elliot's complaints about my hours, my hair, my everything. And I thought, if this is it, if this is the only life I get, I don't want to spend it apologizing for breathing. Colt's breath hitched. So I left, I said. Signed the divorce papers. Broke my lease. Packed what I could in 2 suitcases and got on a bus. I didn't know where I was going until the driver said, Willow Ridge, last stop. And I thought, I used to know that name. I used to know this town. Maybe it can know me again. He was quiet for a long time. You're braver than you think, he said finally. I let out a shaky laugh. I don't feel brave right now. Maybe not right now, he conceded. Right now, you're standing next to a man half the county would love to see behind bars. But leaving a life that's killing you slow? That takes guts, Ray. Even if your hands shake the whole way. Tears pricked my eyes. I looked at him, my heart in my throat. You don't have to carry this by yourself anymore, I said, echoing May's words without meaning to. He went still. What if you didn't? I pressed on, the words spilling out now. What if you told the sheriff the truth? What if you made a plan with May, with people you trust, to dismantle the scan from the inside and then let it go? All of it? The mask. The hits. The line you're killing yourself holding. He laughed once, humorless. You think the sheriff has gone not believe I've been playing Robin Hood all these years? I think. I stepped closer, my voice firming. That he might believe a woman who saw your face and watched you risk your life to keep her safe. Who watched you stand between this town and men like Jake. Who watched you choose the land and the people over your own freedom more times than she can count?
His gaze locked with mine. Intense. Ray, if you were alone in this, I said, you'd spiral until it swallowed you. But you're not. Not anymore. You have May. You have this ranch. And maybe... I swallowed hard.
Maybe you have me. His breath caught.
That night,
I whispered, in the barn.
I meant it. You feel like the only place I can breathe. But if you're going to keep me close for my safety, then I want to do the same for you. I want to keep you close.
For yours. The air between us crackled. Slowly, like he was moving through water, Colt lifted his hand and cupped my cheek, his palm warm and calloused. You don't know what you're offering, he said hoarsely.
Yes,
I said. I do. His thumb brushed away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. You deserve a man with clean hands, he murmured. I've seen clean hands do plenty of damage. I gave a small, trembling smile. I'll take a man with rough ones who actually tries to protect people. He huffed a low breath that might have been a laugh, might have been a sob. One day, he said, this might break your heart. One day, I countered, this might save yours. We stood there, breathing the same cool air, watching each other like we were both standing on the edge of something big and frightening and beautiful. Then he leaned in. The kiss, when it came, wasn't wild or greedy. It was soft, careful. His lips brushed mine like a question he was still half afraid to ask. My heart squeezed. I answered by leaning closer, by letting my hand rest against his chest where his heartbeat thudded steady and strong under my palm. His fingers slid into my hair, tilting my face, deepening the kiss just enough to make the world tilt, a slow burn rush that had nothing to do with lust and everything to do with relief. Relief that I wasn't alone. Relief that maybe he wasn't either. When we finally pulled apart, foreheads resting together, we were both breathing a little harder. If you want more slow burn cowboy protector romances, a warm, future version of my voice murmured in the back of my mind. Subscribe and turn on notifications. I smiled against his mouth, the absurdity and rightness of it all tangled together in my chest. I'm scared, I whispered. Me too, he admitted. But I'm more scared of doing this without you. Doing what? He took a deep breath. Calling the sheriff tomorrow, he said. And starting the end of the Wilder Gang as this town knows it. It wasn't clean. It wasn't easy. It took weeks of careful planning, quiet meetings at the back of the church after services, coded phone calls, May smacking Colt upside the head when he tried to take on too much himself. Sheriff Daniels was wary at first, for good reason. Colt told him just enough to prove he was serious, holding back the details until protections were in place. If you're playing me, Daniels had said, hand on his belt, eyes sharp. I'm tired of playing anything, Colt had replied. I just want my ranch back, my life back. And I want you to stop tripping over bodies in my county. The sheriff had looked at me then, standing in the shadows of his office. You vouching for him, Miss Collins? He'd asked. My heart had pounded so loud I was sure they both could hear it. Yes, I'd said. With everything I have. In the end, it came down like this. A sting operation that looked like just another job to Jake and Rafe. A shipment, set up with Daniels' men watching from a distance. Colt in his mask, riding with his crew one last time. I watched from the kitchen window at the ranch with May, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug crescents into my palms. You can't go? I'd asked him that morning, standing by the truck. Somebody has to be there, he'd said. They trust me. They won't suspect until it's too late. What if something goes wrong? My voice had cracked. He'd cupped my face in his hands, eyes burning. If something happens, you take the deal Daniels offered. Witness protection, new name if that's what you want. You live your life, Ray. You don't wait around for a dead man. I'm not. You listen to me. His voice had been firm, but his thumbs had stroked my cheeks like he couldn't help it. I'm not going anywhere. Not unless you tell me to. But if I can't get back... You live. You hear me? Tears had spilled over. Say it, he'd insisted. I live, I'd whispered. With or without you,
He'd nodded, satisfied, then leaned in and kissed me like a promise. Now, hours later, the waiting felt like a living thing.
We should have heard something by now, May muttered, pacing.
Maybe the radios are. Her phone buzzed. We both froze.
She snatched it up, squinting at the screen. Then her shoulders dropped a fraction. It's Daniel's. I swallowed. Put it on speaker. She did.
May, Daniel's rough voice came through, sounding tired but lighter somehow. We got 'em. Jake Rafe, the rest of his little army. Guns, money, ledger. Enough to keep him behind bars till Judgment Day. And Colt?
May asked, her voice steady only because she'd had decades of practice. There was a pause. My heart stopped. He's banged up, Daniel said finally. Took a hit to the ribs when Jake realized what was happening. But he's alive. He's at the clinic. Asking for you. Both of you, actually. My legs went weak with relief.
I'll drive, May said, ending the call and grabbing her keys.
I followed her out the door, barely thinking, just moving. As we pulled out of the yard, dust rising behind the truck, I stared at the Wilder Ranch in the rearview mirror.
No, not the Wilder Gang's base. Just a ranch. Just a home. Ours if we wanted it.
You don't have to carry this by yourself anymore. Colt looked smaller on the clinic bed, a bandage wrapped around his ribs and 4 in his arm. But his eyes were the same. They lit up when he saw us. Hey, he said, voice rough.
May marched over and smacked his shoulder gently, but not that gently.
You idiot, she said, tears shining. You could have died. Nice to see you too, May. He grunted.
I hovered in the doorway, emotion clogging my throat.
You gonna come in or you just gonna stand there making moon eyes? He asked, a hint of his old drawl sneaking in.
Heat rushed to my cheeks, but my feet carried me forward.
I stopped by the bed, fingers twisting in my jacket hem. You okay? I asked.
I've been better, he said.
Been worse too. He reached out, hand palm up, an invitation.
I took it. His fingers closed around mine, warm and solid, and something inside me unclenched.
Daniel, say what kind of deal they're offering? May asked, folding her arms. Colt nodded. Testify. Hand over everything I got on the operation. Help them track down the money trail.
In return, reduced sentence, most of it served under house arrest at the ranch. Probation. Community service. No federal time as long as I cooperate fully. That's good, I said cautiously.
It's more than you deserve, May sniffed. And exactly what you do deserve at the same time. If that makes any sense. It doesn't, he said. But his eyes were grateful. What about your men? I asked softly. Jake, Rafe. They'll do time, he said. Daniels will make sure they don't die in there. That's all I can ask. And the gang? I whispered. He squeezed my hand. It's over, he said simply. No more masks.
No more rides at midnight. No more lines to hold.
Tears welled up again.
What am I supposed to do with myself now?
He asked, half to me, half to the ceiling. Just ranch? Just ranch, May said firmly. Fix your fences. Grow your herd. Help your neighbor when his well breaks. Show up at church once in a while so folks remember you ain't the devil. Colt snorted. And maybe, I said, my voice shaking but sure, maybe help me set up that little coffee cart I've been thinking about.
Out by the road.
Wilder Brew. Catch the morning ranch traffic. His brows lifted. You serious? I nodded.
I've been thinking about it for weeks. Daisy taught me her secret coffee blend.
May's biscuits. Your land. My nursing brain for business and inventory. It could work. He smiled then. Slow and warm. Like the first sunrise after a long storm. You want to stay? He said, wonder in his voice. I do, I said. If you'll have me.
If this town will have us. His grip tightened. I'm not going anywhere, he said.
Not unless you tell me to. I won't, I whispered. May sniffed. Well, I guess I better start planning how we going to fit another coffee pot in my kitchen. We all laughed, a shaky, tired, disbelieving kind of laugh that felt like the first breath after being underwater too long.
If you were in her boots, what's the first thing you'd do on that ranch tonight?
Tell me below. Summer came slow to the prairie.
The trial was messy but necessary. Colt stood up in court and told the truth, voice steady, eyes clear. Jake glared at him like he'd personally salted his fields, but even he couldn't deny the evidence. People in town whispered. Of course they did. Some about how Colt Wilder had betrayed his own men. Some about how he'd saved half the county from worse violence. Some about me, the diner nurse turned outlaw's witness turned ranchwoman. But whispers are just wind. They came and went. What stayed was us. By fall, Colt's house arrest had softened into supervised freedom. He wore an ankle monitor for a while, then just a reputation one he was slowly rebuilding, one fence post at a time. The Wilder Brew coffee cart became real a small, refurbished horse trailer we painted a soft cream, with Wilder Brew hand-lettered on the side in May's surprisingly neat script. We parked it by the ranch gate on weekday mornings. Ranchers rolled up in dusty trucks, leaning out for coffee and biscuits. Construction crews heading into town grabbed thermoses. Sheriff Daniels himself became a regular. I still don't approve of everything you've done, he told Colt one morning, taking a sip of his coffee. But I can admit this is the best damn cup in the county. I'll take it, Colt said, lifting his own mug. Sometimes people looked at us with suspicion, sometimes with curiosity, sometimes with quiet gratitude. We didn't push, we just showed up. Day after day, night after night, we walked the fence line together. Not because we were waiting for trouble anymore, but because it had become our thing. Sometimes we talked about small things, weather, calves, May's new hobby of attending every church potluck within a 50-mile radius. Sometimes we talked about big things. What it means to start over at 32 and feel like you're already behind. What it means to be needed by everyone but loved by few. What it means to finally feel like home isn't a place you stuff yourself into, but a place that expands to fit you.
You ever regret it? I asked him one night as we leaned against the fence, watching the last light fade. Leaving that life. Working with Daniels. Letting the world see your face. He thought for a long moment. Sometimes, he said honestly.
When the bills stack up and the fences break and the past feels closer than the future. Sometimes I wonder if I made things harder for you.
If you'd have been better off never seeing me in that alley. I turned to face him fully, my hand finding his. I'd still be in the city, I said. Still apologizing for wanting to breathe. I'd still believe that the safest man is the one who looks clean on paper, not the one who stands in front of me when danger rides in. I squeezed his fingers. I don't regret seeing your face, I said. Not for a second. His eyes softened, the lines around them crinkling. You feel like the only place I can breathe, he murmured, echoing my words from that night in the barn. I smiled, tears pricking my eyes. If you stay, I stay, I said. If you're here, I'm here. He leaned in and kissed me. Slow and warm. The kind of kiss that tasted like coffee and hope and a dozen tomorrow mornings. We pulled apart when a truck rolled up to the gate, a familiar green one. Daisy hopped out, hands on her hips, eyes scanning the ranch. Well, I'll be, she said, grinning. You did it, honey. You went and tamed the outlaw. Colt snorted. Pretty sure it's the other way around. Daisy hugged me tight, then held me at arm's length, eyes shining. You happy, Ray? She asked. I looked around. At the ranch house with its porch light glowing. At May's silhouette in the kitchen window, fussing over a pot of stew. At the coffee cart by the gate, our name on the side. At Colt, standing beside me, not in front of me, not behind me, with me. I am, I said softly. I really am. Later that night, as we closed up the cart and headed back toward the house, the prairie stretched out before us, wide and open, the sky full of stars. Danger still existed somewhere out there. Men like Jake would get out someday and make choices. Life would never be simple.
But standing on that land, with Colta's hand warm in mine and the future unspooling before us like a long dirt road, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Safe, protected, chosen, like I'd finally come home, not to a town or a house or a job, but to a person. To a man who had once kept me close for my safety, and now kept me close because he loved me, and I loved him right back.
If you want more slow burn cowboy protector romances, subscribe and turn on notifications. And let's see what the prairie brings us next.